Welcome to another episode of the Next Chapter podcast. I'm really excited to introduce you to Becky from Love Set Match. And it's interesting how Becky and I met because I didn't know her. I'm actually now in New Jersey. She is in Brooklyn, and we met through a Facebook group. And I ended up seeing a post that Becky wrote about her business. I was very intrigued by it. And I ended up sending her a private message telling her that I loved her story, that I was inspired and wanted to learn more. And so here we are. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. I'm so glad that you reached out, you saw my post and we connected, and this is so cool. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks.
Well, welcome. And before we actually begin, I wanted to talk a little bit quickly about the fact that I reached out because I think so many people are afraid to kind of open that door, start a conversation with someone that they have no connection to. I had zero connection to you other than we had this mutual Facebook group. And I think that there's a lot to be said about, knocking on someone's door, opening up that conversation, because the worst that could have happened is you ignored it, you deleted it, but you actually answered it. So I'm curious, when you did receive my initial reach out, kind of what went through your mind and what kind of allowed you to respond?
Well, I totally agree with what you're saying because as a small business owner, the messages and the emails and the cold calls, they're never ending, so it's like something you just have to get over. I will say I get amazing feedback whenever I'm posting on Facebook or any kind of community groups that have other mothers on there, more so than anywhere else, I would probably say. So I love getting your message, and I mean, I think I got a lot of messages at that time, so I couldn't respond right away, but I was like, ooh, I'm gonna like check back on this and respond to her because that sounds really cool. And I just loved the support. I mean, it's amazing. You never know who you're going to connect with. Anytime you just throw anything out there, and that's something that I feel like I've really learned through this journey, where I am right now, and always trying to take advantage of different groups and different people and connectors. And it doesn't have to be awkward, especially these days, like through all these digital platforms. It's like a way everyone's connecting, and it can be a lot less threatening, I think, sometimes than in person as well. So I
Yeah,
totally.
100%. And I think that when you are genuine about it and that you share what it is that you found interesting, that, like I said, you never know. I had no idea if you were going to respond. And when you did, I was really happy. And then we took the conversation offline and we got on the phone and we had a conversation, and here we are. So I guess just the overall message before we get into the full conversation to the listeners is you never know. Take that moment to make a connection. If something intrigues you, reach out because you can make a beautiful connection. So now I am connected to someone else in Brooklyn. So there you go. So I want to focus today's conversation because I know you mentioned, a different journey where you are right now. And I know that you've reinvented yourself many times. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But before we can actually begin, let's go to the beginning of Becky and what you kind of dreamed of when you were a little girl. So, what
Okay.
did you dream of becoming? And then we can get into kind of your different chapters.
Okay. So I think I mentioned this earlier to you, but I came from a really, really small town in Massachusetts. So small that my dad would always say it's a one street light town or something. Like that's what how he would always say it. So very small town in Southeast Massachusetts on the way to Cape Cod. Not really the Cape, but on the way.
Mhm.
And it was wonderful, like a wonderful place to grow up. But I always dreamed of bigger things. And so my entire life, I always wanted to move to New York. And we had relatives out in Long Island, and I would beg my parents, could we come into the city for the day or go visit them? We take the train in. I was just always lit up. So I always knew I wanted to live in New York. Some way I was going to get here. Actually, funny story, when I was moving to New York later, I moved right from college with my boyfriend at the time, who later became my husband. We've been together a very long time. There were these movers that came to my house from this town, this very pretty town in Massachusetts. And they were coming from New York to like move all of our stuff. And
Right.
they said, "Why are you leaving?" And my husband always thought that was so funny because I was like, no one's ever been more excited to leave. And it was really this beautiful kind of bucolic, town and on the ocean, and but just very small, like there were not many jobs, in a place like that, and not for what I wanted to do. And I just like thrived off the excitement of the city, but it was pretty funny and ironic, I would think. So yeah.
I think it's so funny, and that it is always funny where what works for one person might not work for the other, and that's really funny how they said like this is so beautiful. Why would you want to leave? But it just wasn't working for you. While it was, it served its purpose in many ways, but you wanted the excitement of the big
Absolutely.
city.
Now
So did you get that?
I
Did you
did.
get that excitement?
I did. Yeah, I did. So I started, should I get into my
Yeah.
back? Okay. So I always wanted to work in fashion. I mean, I did actually also want to be on Broadway, but once that didn't work out, I
Did you try?
I did not, but I did grow up. I was a classically trained singer and an actress and things like that. So, but I decided not to pursue that path at some point.
Okay.
But I studied English in college. I loved to write. I wanted to work in fashion. I always loved fashion. So this was, I'm not going to date myself, but this is really during the glory days of magazines. And I just grew up reading 17 magazine. I learned everything I knew from that magazine. Vogue. I would anxiously await my Vogue in my small town. Didn't know anyone at any of these places. And I applied for internships just blindly. I went to New York. I like took the train or something from college, and I went to all these different interviews, and I had two internships in one summer because I was so determined to have a job in magazines.
Yep.
And I really lucked out. One of the girls that I worked for, she was leaving as after I graduated, so I took over her job, and that was managing the closet at Marie Claire magazine. So
Very cool.
yeah, which is sounds super glamorous. Wasn't really, but it was where all of the clothes and all the accessories for the magazine came in. And it was my job to sort of like organize them, and you have to send them back to designers and get them to the shoots. And I also was in charge of all the interns. And it was pretty incredible that I got this job. And I was just sort of like in the middle of it all. And yeah, but it was a lot of work. So a lot of long nights. And I have a lot of stories from that portion of my career, but it was an incredible learning experience. And I just got to see how everything worked in magazines. And then from there, I just kind of paid my dues. And
Hmm.
I was an assistant editor. Then I became a market editor. And I kept kind of working my way up in magazines and putting all my time in. And it was incredible. I worked at Marie Claire. I worked at Cosmo Girl, which was an amazing magazine for women, like and for girls, empowering girls. And sadly, when I was there, it was one of the first magazines to close in 2008.
Hmm.
So I was sort of seeing like the recession immediately before it was like right when everything was starting to happen in New York. And it was pretty sad because I was only 26. I had just gotten married. I had just kind of gotten to like a pinnacle kind of in my career. And then it was like, magazine's closing.
Yep.
It was my first sort of senior job after I had been kind of paying my dues for a number of years, where I was sort of, had my own, I was a market editor. So that was a bummer, and that was sort of like the beginning of things sort of coming down in that world. I continued to freelance a lot, and then I ended up at More Magazine, where I was the accessories editor there, which was awesome. Um, but it was sort of starting to, you could kind of tell like more magazines were closing. It was when digital media was starting to take over. Bloggers, totally different different way of getting information. So I was sort of there at like the heyday and kind of saw it kind of moving on. So that was when I had to, like we were talking about in the beginning, I had to think about reinventing myself. When I was even still at this job, which was awesome. I mean, I traveled to Switzerland to go look at watches and diamonds, and I was on photo shoots with celebrities and all this stuff, but you kind of knew the clock was ticking.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think at this point, I had been married. I wanted to maybe start a family. And I also knew that the life of an editor for me wasn't going to work with probably having a family with the hours and the travel I was having to do. So, and we wanted to buy a house. We wanted to, like, sort of move on in that way. So it was like all these things kind of happening at once. And I just sort of just like stumbled upon someone asking for some fashion advice. It was a friend of a friend, like asked my husband, like, do you think Becky could help my friend go through her closet and maybe pick out some new things for her? She lost a lot of weight. So I was like, okay, that sounds fun. It was just like a
Yeah.
girlfriend kind of thing. So I went over to her house and I was like, oh, you don't need this anymore. It doesn't fit you. Why don't you try something else? And she was a mom. She had just lost a lot of weight and was like feeling good. So I took her shopping and she just felt incredible. And she started like referring me to all these people. And they were all these like moms on the Upper West Side who sent their kids to this school. And I couldn't even like stop like getting their calls. I was still working my day job. And I was
Right.
like, they were like, how much do you charge? I was like, what? I had just done this for fun. So I just kind of was like right time, right place. And so I started seeing these people at night and on the weekends, and I go through their closets and I take them shopping. And, I was coming from this background. What I did as an editor was I knew where to find everything at every time. That was my job.
Mm-hmm.
So I was sort of, I guess, like a wealth of knowledge to these people, and I loved it. So it just sort of worked out where I started to grow that, and that was where I started to do. I called it LBD for Little Black Dress,
Love that.
and I left my job at More. And to do this, and they totally understood. My editor in chief was incredible, and when you think about reinventing yourself, she sort of coined that term for women over 40, Leslie Jane Seymour, because
Mm-hmm.
at More, at the time I was 30 and or 20, 30 or something. So I didn't totally understand it yet, but that was what a lot of what we were covering there was like reinventing yourself, women in their 40s doing something else. And
Mm-hmm.
so she was totally like, oh, this sounds awesome. And she totally understood. So I started to do that, and we were able to buy a home in Brooklyn, and I was able to have my own schedule. I worked mostly, and I still do, because I still do this, mostly with women who are mothers trying to balance their lives, trying to have a career and try to, still what to wear on the weekends when they go to birthday parties, and but also travel for work, or, and they run the gamut. I've worked with stay-at-home moms. I work with moms that are, work in finance, and lawyers and doctors, and incredible stories and different people, and men that I've worked with also. But I would say that was probably my first sort of reinvention.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to answer your question, that's a long-winded answer, but
No, I appreciate you taking us through kind of your journey. And it sounds like when you were doing the different things that you enjoyed it, and then it got to a point where you recognized that based on where you were in life right then and there, that you were married, that you wanted to consider, buying a home, and that, kind of some of your values shifted a little bit. And maybe those long hours were no longer going to work for you and what your, new goals were. And that takes a lot to be able to recognize that, first of all, and then also to make that shift towards what makes you feel more aligned, because so many times people will just sit in that
yeah.
discomfort and not actually make that shift. So I give you a lot of credit for doing that. What allowed you, though, like within yourself, to be able to do that?
Um, I think it was like maybe a long time coming, the shift from magazines to my own business. In some ways it was, you know, a pretty, I mean, it was an incredible experience, but in a lot of ways, there's a reason I think why that world has not really kept up with today's modern sort of values. And I mean, it was very kind of, highly competitive, highly stressful, kind of world that I feel like now we have a very different idea of work-life balance. So I think I was just kind of doing that maybe a little early in a way, if that makes any sense, sort of
Yeah.
recognizing that for myself. Also, yeah, I mean, just the freedom of like working for yourself. I mean, there's nothing like it if you can. And I kind of stumbled upon something where I found like it was possible. I didn't have an office, I didn't have an overhead, and I didn't have employees. I didn't have, a little different than what I do now. Now I have a product, so it's different. But like when you become a consultant, it's kind of an easy segue, I think, from leaving kind of those comforts, because you're really just, you're seeing people. You can work as much as you want, as many hours, and you can gauge it like, well, I need to work more. I need to find more clients. So I'm going to, do that. But yeah, it was just sort of at the right time. And then on top of that, also, I just think that shortly after the magazine I was at closed. And I feel like there, only I can count like on my hand my friends that are left in that kind of world. And most people have had to start their own businesses. They work for brands. It just sort of, or many became bloggers, or that whole world was starting to take off with like influencers. So it was just the right
So it
time for
sounds like
that
there was
shift.
a shift. There was a
Yeah.
shift, but also um, it sounds like because you said that it was one person that wanted um, your fashion expertise, and then it turned into others. So it goes back to like that at the very beginning of the conversation. We said you can say yes and see where it goes. And you said
So
yes, and then it became a whole source of referrals. And now it's a business that
yeah,
you know, still
it's been
do.
a
So it
long
goes
time.
back to,
It's
yeah.
sorry, that's my dog. I keep
Hey,
but
that's life. That's life of, mothers. That's life,
yeah, I just faked it till I made it. Like most of that, like I had to come up with like, I don't know, a questionnaire when I saw my clients. I didn't even know. I was just like, okay, these are the like I just kept faking it till I make it. It was like that over and over until I had a system and I had a way it worked. And then I eventually evolved that. But in the beginning, oh my God, yeah, I was just saying yes to anyone, that would, yeah, it was just a lot of yeses and just doing it and just not, not freaking out about it.
Well, I love that because if you said no, then you're really saying no to yourself. Really, when
Yeah.
people say, no, it's like you're saying no to yourself. And like you said, maybe you didn't at the time have all the skills to be able to, have the systems in place, but you certainly had the fashion sense. You
Yeah,
certainly knew where to get the clothes. You certainly knew how to talk to people and accessorize and personable and all of that. And so maybe it was just figuring out the business systems, but that's in
absolutely.
anything. There's always growth
And that's
learning
been the
curve.
same thing with like my newest endeavor. I guess if you just have that knowledge and that drive, the rest falls into place. I mean, it may not be pretty, but it eventually does. And I think that was the case. I mean, I'm very lucky. I feel like my husband's a great support. And I remember when I was first starting out, we figured out like my fee for styling based on personal trainers fees. It was just like we were just like, I don't know, because no one was doing this at the
Yeah.
time too. I would say now there's now a lot of people out there call themselves stylists. And that's because of the growth of
Yeah.
like influencing and blogging. Everyone thinks that. I really was one. But again, there
Yeah.
wasn't any kind of comparison. So something like that, like all those types of business models, that was I was like, I had the knowledge. And as soon as I got in someone's house, I knew what to do. But it was much more of like, oh, well, what am I calling this? What am I packaging in this? What am I pricing? Also, I came from English major. I'm a very creative person. I'm all that one side of my brain. So that other side and like the business side, I've had other like supports in my life that have been helping me like throughout the journey with that kind of stuff. Cause that's been to me like one of the biggest challenges, but also the biggest growth for me is thinking myself as a business person. At the end of the day, it's
Mhm.
a business. You can love it, but it does have to make money and continue on.
Exactly. Well, before we get into where you are, kind of also the love set match and how I found you, you mentioned support. And I think that that's also very important to point out because while we are women and we all wear super capes and we can do, a lot and probably do it all, but it's like at what cost? So, my question, you mentioned that you have a nice support system. What does your support system look like? What did it look like as you were building, and now kind of what is your support system to allow you to do what you're doing?
Well, I mean, my parents have always been incredibly supportive of all of my ideas, business adventures. Like, yeah, absolutely. And my husband, 100%. And I also feel like since I've gotten into the entrepreneurial space, so many other female entrepreneurs have been so incredibly supportive and other women. And that was something that I'm going to be honest, I didn't always feel in the fashion editorial world.
Mhm.
It wasn't really the kind of environment where you had that many mentors or people really looking at was that really kind of, I mean, you might have at the top, right? Like an editor in chief or
Right.
someone like that, but not always like your immediate boss or something. It was much because people were busy and they were doing their own things. It wasn't, like other professions maybe in that way. Um, so I was so amazed when I started to have my own small business that there were so many supportive women out there. Actually, like my first client I ever had, that woman that I helped, who I still see to this day, she actually coaches small businesses. And she's helped me so much when I've been reinventing that business, my styling business, but also with
Hmm.
Love Set Match. Like my husband and I have had calls with her, like she'll just accept an email, like so supportive, whether that was sending me clients or just having ideas for the business. And other ones, like I've had other clients that are small business owners, but also just, I don't know, they've just been so supportive, whether that's through a referral or through having me at an event. And now with Love Set Match, I mean, same thing, like other women in my life that, are buying something from me. Like you don't think about that, but just someone ordering something when you're a small business order, it's huge. You could like obviously give them something, but it means something more when someone places an order. I don't know. It's like it's very supportive. So I feel like that's been a huge thing that I've really noticed stepping into small business world, that there are a lot of moms that are incredibly supportive, and I think that's because they understand, what you're doing and the sacrifices, and they understand. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's just like an understanding,
No,
I
it
feel like.
definitely does. I think that
Yeah.
there's that kind of common language or connection, and I love hearing you say that there were other women that are so supportive, and that's exactly why I started this podcast community, is to build a community of women supporting each other, um, and sharing journeys, sharing the the good, the bad, the challenges, and all of that, and to find that support, to find that comfort, because there are times when you might not have that immediate support system. I would hope that everyone would have that immediate, like, women's group or whatever, but
Mhm.
you know, it, this is life, and there are moments where we feel judged or not as comfortable or whatever. And so I think it is so beautiful that you've been able to find that support
Yeah.
for yourself, within your family, within your spouse, but then also with that entrepreneurial kind of community. So, can you now speak to a little bit where you are today? Because now you've, added another layer to your reinvention, and that is exactly how I met you. So, can you talk to us about what you are also doing?
Okay. So we were talking, I'm doing styling for a long time while my daughter's growing up, and it was incredible because I could always be there for her, but I could be working part-time and creating my hours. Okay, well then COVID hit, which I'm sure this is a huge time for reinvention with everyone. I don't think I'm
Right.
alone here, right? But everyone, no matter what kind of job, whether you're in a corporate job or have your own small business, people had to start rethinking their work. And I definitely did, because my job was dressing people for every day, but more so for work for work travel, for weddings, for events. Like that was a lot of my job. So suddenly everyone was at home in sweatpants and they did not need me, or they didn't need me in the same way. I was actually sending out like links to sweatpants. Like that's where I had been. So I revamped my business a little to include virtual services, but it slowed down.
Mhm.
And so at the same time, my daughter, I believe she was about 5 at the time, she started to get more serious into tennis. And my husband and I grew up playing tennis. We actually met playing tennis in college, club level, but
Yeah,
in college, mind you.
that's
Um,
cool.
and we always loved tennis. My husband had worked at the USTA, so and we loved when he worked there, and we got to go to the US Open all the time, and that was awesome. And he's also worked in sports most of his career, as I have been working in fashion. So at this time, I got so excited. She was starting to play at John McEnroe Academy. It's a prestigious tennis academy here in New York. I was like, "Ooh, I can't wait to buy her some cute tennis stuff." I mean,
Yeah.
this is like a dream. I love fashion. I love tennis. I was like, "Ooh, there's going to be such cute stuff out there." Well, there was nothing. And I was so surprised because I feel like, activewear for women's been such a thing. And boys, there's like Nike and Under Armour, and that's all they ever wear. But there was nothing really out there that I liked that appealed sort of to like me, but also to the taste of someone that was 5 or 6. Something that didn't just look like a woman's outfit, but small. So anything I could find was like white. It was very, and even my daughter wasn't playing at an all white tennis place, so she didn't need that. And everything was sort of like, it was very prim and kind of like antiquated. It felt like it was from another time. And that's, I mean, we live in New York. Like she's wearing colors, she's wearing sequins, she wants to express herself.
Sure.
So that was when I said something to my husband about it. And he's like, well, why don't you design your own line? And I kind of looked at him. I was like, well, I've never done that before. And he's like, I mean, I like know about stuff, which is true. I was always like a curator of fashion, picking out the best things, putting them together, but never actually creating fashion.
Mhm.
And he's like, oh, but you could. Why couldn't you? I don't know. Look into it. And I don't know, that was kind of it. I connected with a colleague, another incredible support when we talk about support, who
Mhm.
had worked with me at Cosmo Girl, who had her own line of women of girls clothing and her own website. And I just was like, am I crazy to think I could do this? And she's like, nope, you could totally do it. You're not crazy. She connected me with a production company in LA who kind of handholds people like who have never really done it. And we just started talking, and I started with sketching things and ideas, and I came up with this line for girls. And my husband took on more of like the business elements, and I was doing more of the creative stuff. And while it took a little time to get it going and actually produce, it's something you don't really know about till you get into it. We were able to launch the next fall, late summer at the US Open. So, yeah, it was kind of I don't know, it was just like one of those things like you hear that people start businesses when they find a need for something. Well, I
Mhm.
actually like couldn't find something and created it for myself. And then since then, I have just heard whether I'm talking to a club who's never sold girls' clothes for tennis because they didn't think there was any,
Wow.
or other moms who are like, I've never found anything like this. I love it. I really did kind of stumble upon that and then try to make it our own. And so we make these tennis sets for girls where they are like coordinated, and we feature these large icons, which are, I think, very kid friendly, allows them to express themselves. They can choose one that represents them. There's a heart, there's a lightning bolt, there's a star. So everything has a meaning, but they're also really fun just for kids and light, and they can wear them to school, they can wear them to tennis. The idea was also that they're easy for moms to mix and match because I'm a mother. I know what it's like to dress a child.
Right.
I also know that if you are spending money on something that your child hates, you're going to regret it because they'll never want to wear it. So I feel like as a mom, I have a totally different perspective as a designer because I
Mhm.
understand exactly what it's like to shop as a mother. But I also, I think, can bring some things to the table from working in fashion for a long time. So yeah, so we've been doing that. It's almost like going to be 2 years in the fall. I guess it's like a year and a half since we technically launched. We came out with more styles. We also started doing women's like matching, like my sweatshirt I have on, because we heard from a lot of moms that they wanted to match with their daughters. So we do things like that. And we do racket accessories and things. And there's just like more, we're a small business. So if we had the means, I would want to do a million things. But right now we're kind of just we're doing this and taking our time. But yeah, this is my newest chapter.
Well, I love that, and I love again how stepping back for a moment, that you took time during COVID and you made the pivot and you understood. You kind of had a sense in the pulse, and you said that you even were sending your clients. You did some virtual. You were sending your clients the sweatpants and understood, and were very aware of what was going on around you. And then also how you mentioned that you filled this need for your daughter, and that's really what kind of drew me to your story. I thought that that was very fascinating, that you had this need, and again, you could have sat on it and said, okay, well, I'm just going to choose um, like you said, the antiquated outfits, or the ones that look like you're dressing a tiny, 5-year-old in a women's outfit. It just doesn't look right for them. But you made something happen. And also that you had the support system, that your husband, I love that he said, you can do this, that he believed in you. And then you're like, oh, you reached out for support, and you make it happen. So that really says a lot about you, and it also is a loud lesson to the listeners that you didn't have all the answers. You knew that there was the need, you knew that you had the styling, but that reach out. There's no like shame in asking for help and for support. It's actually like a good thing.
Oh
So
yeah.
kudos
And,
to that for sure.
and so many people want to share too, because they have good and bad things to share, like learn from their, like my friend that had the children's website, like she had like great contacts, but she was like, well, you don't want to do this. I learned from my experience. And now I would say that too. Someone recently reached out to me about like a production company I worked with, asking my opinion. Well, now I can share it because now I've been there. Like people want to share because they have, you never know like the knowledge you're going to tap into there. I
100%.
feel like people are always open. Again, I feel like in the small business kind of space, like people are just happy to support and answer those kind of questions. Because I would have really had no way. And even now, like I'm still learning, like manufacturing things is like a whole nother
Yeah.
space. Never, ever. I had no idea. Like I knew how things were designed. I was used to going to maybe like even wholesale appointments and seeing, but I didn't even know where that was coming from. So the actual production of clothing has been totally mind blowing and just a learning process. And we're constantly learning things. I've also really had to teach myself social media, which has
Hmm.
become, which I'm sure you know too. And I feel like small business people have to learn.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you just like have to teach yourself. So I've had to ask questions. Like I actually remember reaching out to this is like so funny, but one of my old assistants from magazines who had like an incredible like following on Instagram about how to do something, and it was like years later, but she was like to me like a young like hip, like she knew what she was doing on there, but like I don't know, was able to help me with something on there that I would not have been able to figure out. But we're constantly like learning, and and this you're just every day I'm learning something new and asking for help too.
I love that. I mean, that is like music to my ears, coming from education. And that the moment that you close your book on graduation, wherever your graduation point is, you never stop learning. Like there is just now, I mean, there's always been, but like now with the internet, you can take online classes, you can Google anything. Be careful with what you Google sometimes, because, you definitely need to vet where you're getting your information from. But there just is so much tremendous growth that can happen. And then also I wanted to point out that you're such a beautiful role model to your daughter, to allow her to see you grow, you evolve, you continue to learn, and to understand that um, there isn't the pressure to have it all figured out when graduate, or to know, I asked you what it was that we started the conversation. What did you want to do when you were little? I like to ask that because I always think that it's interesting to see if there was some kind of correlation, or in moments when people do feel stuck, they can go back to that kind of childhood spirit and pull from that. But you don't have to have it all figured out. And so you're a beautiful, kind of role model to your daughter. So how does that kind of play into things? Because I know that you said your daughter is involved in the business. She's the
She's
model,
really
right?
involved. She's really involved. I mean, she enjoys it. I mean, I'll be honest, like we're like bootstrapping this small business style. So I rely on a lot of people that I know for things. Like I have friends that I worked with in magazines that help with photos. I have, I might hire out for certain things, but yeah, I use my kid as a model. Like she's the star model and her friends. I would never do it if she didn't want to do it. She loves it. She actually now wants to get an agent, she told me, because she wants to do more. So,
So cute.
but she loves it. Her friends are always like, "Can I be in the next photo shoot?" And I love it because they're real. And I think that's something that we're trying to go for too. Like yes, we have very serious tennis players that wear our stuff who may be like my daughter and they play in tournaments, but we're approaching it more from the angle of just, kids that play tennis after school, or they go to tennis camp, or they play on vacation with their parents. They play in the summer. Like, girls that just, like tennis and being active, which we think is so important for girls to play sports. So the fact that I get to use my daughter and real girls that aren't models is, I think, even better.
Mhm.
Mind you, it can be, a little difficult sometimes corralling them, but their energy is genuine and they're real, and they came, I mean, I picked them up from school and then we go to a photo shoot. So there's something very cool about that and the energy they give off. But I will say I also use them all the time for ideas, because I do feel
Smart.
like she's 8 now. Almost 9. So they're not quite in that tween age where they're really dictated by what's out there trend wise, which I'm sure everyone knows about that stuff right now and all the
Mhm.
headlines in the news about them. This is still an age where they're like, it's interesting, they're dressing and they have ideas, but they don't all have to have the same uniform trends. They still want to express themselves, and really be out there with what they really love. They're not trying to conform yet fashion
Right.
wise. So I get some like really great ideas. Like right now, we're working on t-shirts, for the spring, and we had some phrases that my husband and I were just like rattling off. I went to pick up and I asked one of the girls who's been in our shoots before.
Yeah.
I gave her 3 and I asked her opinion. And I feel like there's nothing better than that. And my daughter's totally involved with that. I ask her for color ideas, print ideas. Also, she's my fit model. So I've
Mhm.
always based the designs on her body and then I grade that accordingly. So yeah, she's super involved and it's a real, when I say like family business, it can't be more family. Like
Yeah.
I go to an event, my husband drives, she sits at the table with me. I pack all of our orders from our basement and I drop them off after drop off at our post office or UPS. So like everything is very family business and it's really cool. It's pretty
That
awesome.
is so cool. I
Yeah.
like that because I talk sometimes, work life balance, trying to find that work life balance. But then I actually had a conversation with another mother last week, and she talked about work life integration and how there's like kind of that balance. But then it sounds to me like you have a lot of that work life integration, that you're integrating, your family members into your business and making it work for you. So kind of how does that play out for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm around my daughter a lot and I feel like I was before COVID as well, and that was always important to me. Now, it's wonderful. My husband also has the opportunity to still work from home a lot. So he's around a lot as well. So, but I think, when you work from home, it is great, but then there's also less separation, right? Like you're saying. So then when my business runs out of my house, there's even less separation.
Right.
So I'm around, but I am always kind of doing things. And, and she's used to that. I'm still giving her my attention, but yeah, am I bringing my laptop to gymnastics after school? Yes, but I'm still there. And then
Right.
at home, she might be doing her homework and I'm fulfilling an order. Like she's used to seeing it around. I'm here and we're here, but like, I may be doing, something. But I will say because she's so involved with the business too, and she's like in on it, it's never feels I feel like she doesn't feel isolated in that way because she knows what I'm doing. She also like as much I do try to limit her. I don't want her to like see a lot of social media. She is on a lot of our social media because she's a model. So she like it loves seeing the little reels that I make and
It's
I'll
cute.
ask her opinion and stuff like that. So I feel like because she's involved, it's like I don't know. It's nice because I can be working from home, but she feels like, we're still all connected. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, for
and
sure.
then I'm always, of course, like taking videos when she's like at tennis practice because I need like footage of things. And, she's just sort of like used to it and is never like annoyed. And I think because I'm here, it's okay. I think it might be
Right.
different if I was in an office all the time working on my business, but I'm around. So I'm
Well,
pretty
that's
lucky.
kind of what she's seen, and that you have made her a part of it, and there's
Yeah.
communication around it, and it sounds like you said, that she's enjoying it. I'm curious now, just talking about you, Becky, how do you kind of prioritize yourself? Self care, how would you define it? How do you prioritize yourself? Or like, what are your non negotiables to get through the day? Because you're running these businesses, but you need to take care of yourself. So, what do you do?
I know I laughed at that. It was on your questionnaire, but I love self care. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, got this one. I don't know. I mean, I think working in like the fashion world for so long, I was always, I don't know, I was very fortunate. I got to test a lot of beauty products. And I've always been into that kind of world because I kind of had it at my fingertips, so to speak.
Mhm.
So I mean, I love anything like beauty and health and wellness related. Um, I laugh at all those girls now these days that are like tweens with 10 step like skincare routines.
You
Because
mean
if
like my almost 13-year-old?
like as me, I'm like, oh my God, my skin. Could you imagine what it would be like? Because I didn't get in that bandwagon until I was in my 30s, but that's me. I'm that person. Um, but yeah, I love anything like that. I love to exercise. I have to exercise for stress. Like
Mhm.
I still would just work out at my home, actually in the basement, where I
Mhm.
also fill orders is where I still do my workouts since
Mhm.
COVID. And I mean, I'm very active and I'm always walking because we live in the city. But in
Right.
addition to that, like I have to exercise just for my own mental. Sometimes I just can't even get going with the day until I exercise or kind of clear my thoughts. And I do Tracy Anderson, which I love. And I would say self care also for me is I am really social. I love being with friends. So sometimes if that's just like getting a coffee with a friend, for sure going out with like other moms or girlfriends, if I can, anything like that, I think is part of my self care. And then on the flip side, I'm also an only child. So I love alone time.
Mhm.
And so sometimes just like self care for me is like when the house is quiet and I can do whatever I want. And it's just maybe that's even doing more work, but it's like self care
Yeah.
when it's just quiet or, often that's, I like, TV, reading, things like that. But yeah, I would say those are my self care. And obviously any kind of shopping or retail therapy is good too.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that because there's a whole mix. And so that's why I kind of ask people about that, because everyone's self care looks different, but it is vital, especially when we're mothers and we're giving so much to others. And then you're a business owner and you're focused so much on your business and building that and all of that, that it is so important to fill your tank first.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
because everything else, you are the center, and then all the little spokes around you, if you're not full, are going to kind of feel it.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think I don't think I'm alone, but I stay up really late at night because I just need some quiet time when everyone's asleep and no one's needs anything. And I see a lot of those funny things on the internet about that. That's me. Like I could be tired all day, but I want to have a cup of TV and I want to watch reality. I'm a cup of tea, sorry, and watch reality TV for like a half hour. And that's, I guess, yeah, my me time.
Yeah, for sure. I love that me time. So kind of as we're ending, nearing the end of our conversation, I really appreciate you sharing all about your life, how you've reinvented yourself. What is one, two things that you want to make sure that every listener walks away with kind of knowing? What is, either a lesson or something that you think that every listener should carry with them and know? I heard it from Becky.
Oh, geez, I don't know.
Pressure's on, Becky.
Well, I would definitely say that I thought about this before too, that you can have all these different chapters going at the same time. You
Mhm.
know, there's no like clear beginning or clear end. I mean, I still do my personal styling and now I have this other business. So I feel like, especially when you start, if you're a mom, obviously that's always going on
Right.
forever, your entire life, as
Right.
while you have different careers or whatever path you're taking. But I also think you could have multiple projects going on at once too. There's never like there doesn't always have to be like a clear line. And I think that's, they all kind of build and feed off of each other. So I think that's something, and that it's never too late. I mean, I didn't
Mhm.
start this till I was like close to 40. I feel like
Mhm.
that's like the beginning for a lot of women now.
For
I mean,
sure.
especially like once their children are school age, that's just like the perfect time. And then later, empty nesters, like it's never too late to kind of start something. And also, probably just, I mean, this is going to sound, I don't know, but like, just don't give up if you don't know anything. You can just learn and figure it out as you go. I mean, that's definitely something I've learned with Love Set Match is, again, I've never done any kind of designing, manufacturing. I mean, and now we've just figured it out. Like it's pretty incredible. I feel like men can too, but I'm going to say it's pretty incredible what women can figure out, just like how we figure out everything when we have a newborn. No
For
one tells you
sure.
anything. You just like bring them home and figure it out. I feel like it's the same having a business or a company. If you have good support and reach out to people, and you can figure it out, you know.
I love that connection that you made because, like you said, motherhood does not come with a manual. Business, they might have like business 101 for dummies or something like that, but you got to just do it. You got to
Yeah.
just jump in. You got to just do it. You got to believe in yourself. You are able to birth a child. You're able to birth a business. It's never too late. And it kind of goes full circle to the beginning of the conversation. And if you say yes, you knock on the door, you ask for support, and you say yes, look at what beautiful things that can happen. You've,
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm gonna just cold call some tennis clubs. I don't know. I've just had people, they just say yes. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, then that's how I'm like growing my business, or you just never know. You never know.
You never know. If you show up as yourself, as your authentic, genuine self, someone's going to say yes. And I appreciate that you said yes to my, random email or DM. And so thank you for being a part of the Next Chapter community. We will link in the show notes how people can reach you and Love Set Match and find out about your beautiful designs and learn more about you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. I could talk all day. Love it.
Well, I appreciate it. We might have to do a part two. Thank you.
Thank you.